Hey everyone, and welcome to today's Explainer. Today, we're unpacking the exact step-by-step blueprint for building a clinical-grade VR therapy app in 2026. If you've been keeping an eye on the digital therapeutic space, you already know things are moving incredibly fast right now. What honestly felt like science fiction just a few years ago is rapidly becoming a strictly necessary tool in modern healthcare. So let's dive right in. To ground our discussion, I want to start with this brilliant quote from the Intellify. They say a VR mental health app is basically a therapy, but inside a headset. And that just hits the nail on the head, doesn't it? It perfectly summarizes how virtual reality acts as this modern, highly immersive bridge for therapeutic care. Look, it's not magic, but it creates these safe spaces where people can actually work through things like anxiety, depression, or stress. You slip on the headset, and suddenly, you're in an environment that is purpose-built to help you face challenges totally at your own pace. Now, you might be wondering, why go virtual at all? Well, we have to contrast traditional real-world exposure therapy against a VR environment. Think about the real world. It is wild out there. It's unpredictable and full of sensory overwhelming variables. Unexpected loud noises, sudden lighting shifts, or just unpredictable crowds can completely derail a session, especially for a neurodiverse learner or someone dealing with severe anxiety. But in VR, the therapist has absolute, total control. They can dial in and modulate the sensory conditions, allowing for individualized, repeatable interventions that are literally impossible to reproduce consistently out in the physical world. And guys, the sheer scale of the financial opportunity backing this up is staggering. The global market is compounding at over 31%. It's projected to reach nearly $29.75 billion by 2035. So, developing a targeted VR platform right now, it represents a massive, high ROI opportunity for sure. We are witnessing a major shift as immersive tech transitions away from just gaming and directly into clinical, rehab, and skill-building uses. Okay, so here is our game plan for today. We'll be following a comprehensive roadmap, kicking off with the 2026 VR therapy boom, moving into defining use cases and workflows, designing the immersive experience, building the architecture and content, ensuring security and compliance, and finally wrapping up with costs, ROI, and launch. All right, let's jump straight into part one, the 2026 VR therapy boom. Get this. Despite clinical studies proving VR's efficacy across dozens of mental disorders, nearly 93% of physical therapists still aren't using VR clinically. No way, right? But it's true. And what that means is the adoption gap, and therefore your market opportunity is vast. The clinical evidence is incredibly strong right now. We're talking meta-analyses showing significant benefits for treating conditions like panic, agoraphobia, and social anxiety. Yet the tools just aren't in the hands of the majority of practitioners yet. That is the exact gap we are aiming to fill. Moving right along to Section 2, defining use cases and workflows. So before writing a single line of code, you have to nail down the clinical flow. The absolute crucial point here is establishing a 5-step workflow that creates what we call a clinical co-pilot tether. This connects the patient in the headset directly to the therapist who is monitoring on a tablet. You can't just drop a patient into an isolated headset experience. You need secure device pairing first, followed by pushing an immersive lesson. Then, and this is huge, real-time streaming allows the coach to see exactly what the learner sees. This empowers the coach to use co-pilot controls to guide the lesson, tweak the difficulty, and trigger prompts, all while capturing critical performance data behind the scenes. Which brings us nicely to Section 3, designing the immersive experience. When it comes to the design, research actually dictates that we must layer 3 key elements: accessibility for wide abilities, usability for minimal errors, and user experience for emotional engagement. You see, when you're building for someone dealing with cognitive changes or neurodiversity, you absolutely cannot just rely on standard video game design. Accessibility ensures that everyone can actually enter and use the app. Usability ensures they don't get frustrated trying to navigate it. And a strong user experience, that ensures they actually feel that vital sense of presence and connection. We really have to strike a delicate balance here. We need rich, visually engaging outdoor scenery, but paired with incredibly simple, accessible interactions. Why? To completely prevent cognitive overload for the patient. Imagine a beautifully realistic mountain setting with the northern lights. That kind of high-quality aesthetic creates deep engagement and can even trigger positive memories. But for the interactions themselves, when an object can be picked up, it simply turns blue. It's frictionless. It's the perfect marriage of a high-quality environment and total ease of use. All right, let's look under the hood in Section 4, Building Architecture and Content. Anchoring all this tech back to actual human outcomes using a low-latency protocol like WebRTC is strictly required. Why? So the therapist can intervene the exact millisecond a patient shows distress. Think about it. If a patient is practicing a really stressful social interaction in VR and the therapist tablet lags by even a couple of seconds, they miss the behavioral cue entirely. Real-time, synchronized streaming across devices isn't just nice to have, it is non-negotiable for clinical safety and efficacy. And to manage the budget side of things, developers are leaning into rendering techniques like Gaussian splatting. Content volume is pretty much always the biggest cost driver in VR development, but by leveraging Gaussian splatting, you can rapidly turn captured imagery into complex, usable 3D environments without needing massive, expensive art teams. It allows you to create those ultra-realistic environments your patients need for true immersion, while keeping your development timelines and costs firmly in check. Next up, arguably the most important part of the build, Section 5, Ensuring Security and Compliance. Developers absolutely must build trust from day one. You do this by implementing meaningful informed consent flows, creating gradual exposure ramps, and collecting only the absolute minimum biometric data necessary. I'll say it again. This isn't a video game, it's a medical tool. You need safety-first, immediate exit mechanisms, like a virtual panic button if a patient feels overwhelmed. You need to fiercely protect their sensitive health data through strict anonymization and local processing. And, of course, you have to be completely transparent about how any algorithms are functioning. Furthermore, if your VR app makes any specific medical claims, well, you've got to play by the rules. You must rigorously plan for FDA clearance. You can't just build the software and try to figure out the regulations later on. You need to define your intended therapeutic use right out of the gate. You need to understand whether you're targeting a 510(k) or a de novo pathway, and you have to generate the necessary clinical evidence to prove your platform is both safe and effective. Okay, let's talk numbers in our final section: costs, ROI, and launch. So what is this whole shebang actually going to cost you? Well, depending on your ambition, costs scale from around $120,000 to $250,000 for a clinical MVP, stepping up to the $250,000 to $450,000 range for a mid-level multi-device build, all the way to $1.5 million plus for a fully HIPAA-compliant enterprise ecosystem. The most cost-efficient route is usually to validate that core learner-coach workflow first through your MVP. Once you establish clinical feasibility and real product market fit, then you expand your lesson library, broaden your device support, and scale up that infrastructure. As you prepare to step into this rapidly accelerating digital therapeutics market, I want to leave you with the most critical question you need to answer today. What specific clinical gap will your platform solve? Because at the end of the day, the technology is amazing, but it's ultimately just the delivery mechanism. Start with the actual patient need, build a rock-solid clinical foundation, and let the immersive technology elevate the care you provide. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. I really hope this blueprint sparks some incredible ideas for your own builds. See you next time.